You're listening to the Zelos podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder, and this week I've got Tom Battaglia on. He is a doctor of physical therapy with the San Francisco Giants organization. He's been down in the Arizona complex, helping the minor leagues and farm teams out. And hey, it's spring training, so we're going to just get underway. But before we do, if you're looking for a little higher education, maybe following in Tom's path and many of my guests before him, you want to get a master's degree of science. Well, Setanta College is a place that you can go. They've got programs in applied sports, biomechanics, and movement science. There's a master's in applied sport and exercise psychology. There's performance coaching and sports injury and return to performance management. Go to setantacollege.com, and if you put in the code RS10, RS10, you can get 10% off tuition. In the meanwhile, follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Click the subscribe button, and here we go. Well, Tom, thanks for coming on Zelos. I'm excited by the fact that we're gearing for spring training right now, and I'm beside myself that you actually have a little time in your schedule to put aside for us to have this conversation. So thank you for that. But tell us, just kick it off. Like, how did you get to be with the Giants? What's your superhero origin story?
I wish I had a really cool story to tell you, but for the most part, it was kind of like a right place, right time and situation. I'm originally from Minnesota, so I went to school up there. Played sports growing up, and kind of wanted to figure out a way, schooling wise, to be able to tie like my love for sports into helping people. And so I figured physical therapy was the best route for me. So when I got into undergrad, I went to school at the University of Minnesota Duluth and did my bachelor's degree in exercise science, and then in biology as well. And then while I was there, had made the decision that I wanted to do physical therapy. So I went to physical therapy school at the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis. And then I think it was probably my second year of PT school, I kind of realized that there was like the option to do the sports residencies, so like a postgraduate year of training essentially. I was lucky enough to get into residency in Minneapolis at M Health Fairview is the name of it. And do a sports residency my second year out of PT school. So I worked for a year, did the residency, and then it was through connections within the residency program that allowed me to interview with the Giants for their minor league PT position. And I've been down here now since in Arizona for almost 3 years. August of 2021 was my start date. So 3 years in August with the Giants.
Dude, something's not adding up here, though. You're from Minnesota. You've got the shoulders of a hockey player, and you are in a baseball organization. What am I missing here? Because
I know, it's crazy.
I guarantee you played hockey growing up, didn't you?
I didn't actually. I'm like contrary.
What?
I feel like I'm a bad Minnesotan. I feel like
No kidding. They let you stay in the state?
I know, I should have probably been evicted actually for not playing hockey. Yeah, I mean, growing up, like my school was so small, my hometown, that our hometown didn't have its own hockey program. We had like a co-op with other schools. So if we wanted to play hockey, we had to go to one of the towns that was probably like 15 or 20 minutes away to play hockey. And I think additionally, my dad was one of our varsity basketball coaches. So my brothers and
Ah,
all played basketball growing up. So I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I didn't grow up playing hockey and come from the state of hockey. But yeah, just one of those flukish things, I guess.
okay. I'll consider editing this out or not, but we'll see.
For sure. Yeah, you can get that. Yeah.
So, University of Minnesota, is there more than one campus for University of Minnesota? This shows how little I know.
Yeah, yeah. There's like so I went to the University of Minnesota Duluth. So Duluth is the name of the town in northern
Got it.
Minnesota. But yeah, it's part of the university system. Um the University of Minnesota Duluth is Division 2 in most sports. They're Division 1 in hockey. So the University of Minnesota, the Twin Cities campus is the main campus in Minneapolis, and there's some offshoot campuses, but the University of Minnesota is the only major Division 1 school. There's a couple schools that have transitioned to Division 1 athletics, but that's the only major Division 1 school in the state of Minnesota.
And I'm curious, was there a specific event that you had that a recognition that I like physical therapy. This is the direction I want to go. Did you yourself get injured and then get worked on by somebody, or you? How did that happen?
Yeah, I feel like most of my classmates had stories like that. I really didn't have I had a couple injuries throughout high school sports and stuff, but nothing that was major enough where I needed to do extensive rehab or anything. I think I was more so just trying to figure out a way, like I said, like I always had this drive to help people. That was always something that I really enjoyed doing. And then I obviously like really enjoyed the sports side of it. So I think it was more so just trying to I think I had to do a research project when I was a sophomore in high school, and it was, what career do you foresee yourself going into? And I did some research and was trying to figure out, okay, like sports, healthcare, how can I combine those two? And physical therapy was the one that kept popping up, and it seemed like the more logical choice for me. Um, and then kind of seeing what some of the sports physical therapists get to do in terms of working with professional teams and Division 1 athletes and stuff was more of the driving force.
Right on. Okay, just a side note, were you a Boy Scout by chance?
No, I wasn't.
No? All right. I didn't know if it stemmed at an early age because I thought we were going to be on similar paths because knock on wood, I have not sustained any kind of major injuries requiring surgery, or I've actually never been in an athletic trainer's room because of anything that's happened on the pitch or anywhere else for that matter. It's just like you find something that you like to do. It involves helping others, like you say, and you get to change how people are feeling. I mean, that's pretty spectacular. So, okay, fast forward. Now you're down in Arizona. You've been there going on 3 years now. This summer will mark 3 years with the Giants organization. First of all, how's it been? Do you like it?
It's been great. I really do think it is truly kind of what I envisioned as a dream job in terms of getting into sports. I didn't necessarily know that I would end up in baseball. I don't think I had my dreams and aspirations set that specifically to one sport, but I knew that I always wanted to get into this realm of high level athletics, whatever it may be. But it's been awesome. I feel like it's kind of like what physical therapy should be in terms of you're not bound by so many of like the insurance barriers and the cost of healthcare and stuff since we're physically hired by the organization and we're treating all of the players. So it's nice we can, if a guy needs 45 minutes of work, we give him 45 minutes of work. If a guy just needs to run through a few things and we only need to be with him for a handful of minutes that day, that's fine too. So I feel like it's just nice to not have to be so constrained by all the insurance barriers and stuff that you would see like in the outpatient private practice world.
So your fellow alum that you went to school with don't talk to you anymore because they're so jealous of the work environment that you're in. They're
I
stuck in these clinics. They've got maybe 15 to 20 minutes where they can see one person, barely be effective, and then write half an hour worth of notes and only get a fraction of what the insurance companies are willing to bill. Hmm?
Yeah, that's something like that. No, I mean,
Yeah.
I have some friends that have landed some pretty awesome jobs as well. And I had a taste of the clinic life when I did residency. We worked in the clinic as well as the training room. And then my first year out of PT school, I didn't get into residency my first year. So that first year I just worked in an outpatient orthopedic clinic. And so I've had a taste of both worlds. Um, yeah, but I would much rather work in the world I'm working in. So I do enjoy it. And it'd be hard for me, I think, at this point to go back to a clinical job just because I really do enjoy everything that I'm doing in the setting I'm in.
Well, you mentioned a dream job, and I'm just imagining this sheet of paper with that has a checklist with bullet points next to it, and you fill it out as to here are the different things that would qualify for a dream job. What's on your list? Because you said it matched up to just about everything your dream job could imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is I think when you go through like the sports residencies or when you go into the clinic, even if you work at a clinic that's predominantly sports, that's not your whole clientele. Like your whole clientele isn't athletic. You might have, and I think that was one thing that really like was true for me during my first couple of years out of school was like whenever I'd work with athletes, those were my sessions that I felt like were the best for me. Like the rapport I was developing with them and just the sessions themselves seemed like they went so much more smoothly. So I was like, man, this would be cool if I could have my 100% of my clientele be healthy athletes, not healthy, but athletes that are looking to get better. So that's pretty cool. And that was probably the biggest thing on my checklist in terms of what I was looking for in a dream job. And that's what I have right now with the Giants. My clientele is all just, probably 18 to, early 30s guys that are professional baseball players. I think the other big thing too is I think it was just cool being part of like the team atmosphere and the training room atmosphere. So, we collaborate with so many brilliant people on a day-to-day basis with athletic trainers and strength and conditioning coaches and dietitians and mental skills, mental health, psychology. I mean, there's just such a wide array of collaboration going on, and I think that's been really, really cool too. So I think those are kind of the two major things. And also just the fact that I think being physically with the team and working for the organization, it's pretty cool to see like these guys succeed, like not only get back to their sport, but succeed, like win minor league championships and hopefully like make it to the big leagues. And hopefully while I'm here, it'd be awesome to, see the Giants make a run in the playoffs or get to the World Series. So that's been really cool too to feel like you're part of that team.
Yeah, I totally can relate to that. That is fantastic. Now, when it comes to the guys that you mentioned, that your patients, clients will say your athletes, how I can imagine that you have a high compliance rate. The compliant client is not something necessarily you find in general population because they're not career athletes, but that's their job, and their job is to win championships, win games, and be the best they can. So is it pretty much assumed that whatever you're going to tell your athletes that they need to do, they're going to do it, or do you run into some challenges?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, you have really good compliance for the most part. I think there are some guys that still need a little bit of a kick, in terms of getting everything done. And I think part of that too is like if it's a long-term injury, like a Tommy John, like they know they're going to be in rehab for the next year. So it is hard for them to stay motivated day in and day out sometimes. But I'd say we probably operate more on the other end of the spectrum of guys wanting to do too much and we have to like slow them down or pump the brakes a little bit. One of those things where it's like, hey, yeah, we know you feel good, but we have to logically progress you through this rehab. We can't have you just do whatever you want because you feel good, kind of thing. We probably operate more like that than we do really having to force them to do what they need to do.
And you mentioned the mental skills coach or mental performance individuals. How closely do you work with them when you're talking about one of these athletes that has something like Tommy John, who's feeling down and they know they've got a year-long recovery? I mean, is this something that you're continually kind of working with the mental skills coach, going, "Hey, here's what we need to do, and if you can get his mind into the game of recovery, it's going to be really helpful," or how does it work?
I'd say like our mental skills coaches do a pretty good job of just intertwining themselves throughout the players at the complex. We definitely have the ability to, if there's someone that we notice in the training room that's struggling with just kind of the focus of attention or just struggling with the mental side of recovering from their injury that we can, chat with the mental skills coach and try to have them um, intervene a little bit, to say the least, I guess. But I would say for the most part, between our staff meetings and whatnot, and just with them intertwining themselves throughout all the players, like I mentioned before, they kind of have an idea of who needs to, or who would, I shouldn't say need, who would benefit from having some mental skill interventions. I think honestly, the biggest thing that's been beneficial is we have a lot of veteran guys that will be in rehab that have went through the process, and almost, I think the younger guys or the guys that are brand new out of surgery they almost lean on those older guys more, and that's almost more beneficial in some ways because those guys are players themselves and they've been through some of this stuff. It's really nice when you have like an older guy who's been around the minor league system or who has even been in the big league system that's in your rehab group because the guys can lean on them and get some insight too and what it takes and what it's like to be a big leaguer.
Okay, you mentioned Tommy John surgery. I'm kind of just, that's one of the most, I won't say popular, most common, most frequent surgical interventions there is. Can you give me your your skinny on that? What your opinion is, what your thoughts are, just revolving around Tommy John surgery in itself, based
I
as
mean,
a
if
physical
it's
therapist.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I didn't see much of it until I got into baseball. Like I knew about it, but and I feel like unless you're working with a very specific population, you don't see a lot of it. So now that I've been down here with the team, I mean, yeah, it's, one of it is your top post-surgical case that you're dealing with. But I think it's one of those things where for most guys nowadays, it's like it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen, or if it already did happen. Most of the guys that you see have already underwent the surgery. I feel like it's pretty rare now to find a guy who hasn't underwent some sort of UCL surgery. um, And I guess the good thing is that now that it's been around for so long, like we're pretty good at rehabbing it for the most part. So you don't get maybe as concerned as you used to about a guy undergoing the surgery. It's obviously still pretty scary because you don't know the outcomes, but for the most part, they rehab pretty well from the Tommy Johns. So yeah, it's one of those things that you see it every day. It becomes pretty commonplace. But I think some of the newer techniques are nice. Some of the new like UCL repair techniques help speed up the process if they're a candidate for it, get them back a little sooner. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think now with it being so commonplace, you feel pretty confident from a rehab side of it that what you've been doing has been working pretty well. Um, the trickiest part is probably like that return to throwing phase, just because that's kind of a mixture of science and just the art of designing a program. And there's not one set throwing program that's going to be the best for them. So that's probably where it gets the trickiest. But overall, I feel like as PTs, we feel pretty confident in our ability to get those guys back to playing for the most part.
Okay, so with science and technology, you mentioned that the surgical procedures have advanced, matured, perhaps refined themselves over the course of, say, the last 10 to 20 years. Can that also be said for the rehab process, the physical therapy, whether it's immediate, acute, post surgical, or if it's getting them into that throwing stage? Like, how much has that matured and improved? Or do you feel like you're still 10 years ago and you're still doing the same protocol?
Feel like there's a lot of new tech and toys in terms of like the recovery piece of things. I think like the meat and potatoes of the actual rehab aren't that much different in terms of tissue healing times and strengthening and when you're going to initiate plyometric movements and when you're going to initiate the throwing program type stuff. But I feel like all of the modalities that we have, the game readies, the Normatec, stuff like that's blown up. I mean, we have so many things that we can use to help fight the inflammation or to help with the swelling and to help with pain mediation and that stuff. And then from a tech side too, I guess we have a lot more. I feel like you see a lot more use of technology towards like the later stages where you're trying to do some strength testing with them. Like we do some like isometric strength testing with the handheld dynamometers to see what their shoulder strength looks like before they throw. And then once you get into the throwing phase, we utilize some of the little IMU chips. We use, I think, Modus or Pulse, I guess is it's not Pulse through Driveline is typically what we use that tracks how many throws they're throwing and spits out like a elbow torque number and a shoulder speed number and all this other stuff. So there's definitely more tech that we can use to track. And I think that's where it's advanced the most. But a lot of it, I mean, a lot of the stuff that you're doing is still pretty similar to what you were doing years ago, because I think just the concepts hold true still.
Yeah, and so it's very easy to fall into the symptomatic site of attention, meaning we're going to focus on that elbow. Maybe we'll go down a little bit toward the wrist and the hand, or maybe we'll go up to the shoulder girdle. But how far, much further do you take it in regards to this particular subject of rehabbing somebody from Tommy John? Are you looking at spine mechanics? Can they easily extend through all vertebrae or flex, laterally flex and rotate? What's their pelvis and their hip? I mean, do you follow it all the way through? Like your particular take on it?
I'd say early on in like their post-op phase, I'm not as concerned about it, but I mean, we typically right away try to get them from like a rehab standpoint. We try to get them in the gym as soon as we can, and they're doing like a modified lower body lift. So that's a no grip lower body for us would be, we have the belt squat machines. We have a lot of Kaiser machines that they can use where they don't have to do any gripping physically. Um, they can do some weighted vest stuff and everything like that too, just to get some weight on them and some resistance. And then as far as like the evaluation of the whole body, we typically, I mean, we do that throughout the year when they're healthy, obviously, and then when they're in rehab, typically saved for us at least a little bit later on once they're getting ready to throw like their plyometrics and stuff. We kind of do a tag team with our S&C and do like a functional movement screen type stuff, and then our actual range of motion testing and whatnot takes into account like T-spine rotation, hip internal external rotation, scapular mechanics, all of that stuff. So I would say it's more of a tag team for us between us and then S and C to just make sure, yeah, they're moving well, knowing that baseball is the throwing motion is such a big energy expenditure throughout the entire kinetic chain.
And is that why you became certified strength and conditioning specialist too, to kind of help bridge that gap, or did that occur prior to becoming a DPT? How did that work?
Yeah, I actually got my CSCS when I was in PT school. So I got it before I was applying for residencies. Honestly, just because I felt like I needed to have a better grasp on just general principles. And I knew that if I wanted to get into athletics, having like a somewhat of a background in strength and conditioning would be beneficial. So I did that before I was done with my DPT degree in school, and I think it's definitely been beneficial in terms of the programming that I give. I don't do as much programming in this job since we have a dedicated S&C um, person that does like our that's dedicated to our rehab group. So I don't do quite as much in the gym. I do more of like the in the training room programming, but obviously the principles still apply. So I think it was really useful, especially being in high level athletics.
And are there any movements that you particularly will prescribe in a program that actually carry through all the way to peak performance? Or is it that you have a certain bandwidth of movements and then somewhere along the way you're like, we're going to stop there and we're just going to throw them into the S&C?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a fine line. It's kind of meshed throughout. I'd say during early post-op, I'm probably handling a little bit more of it just in the training room, just from a restriction standpoint. But with that being said, like I mentioned earlier, I mean, if it's a right arm injury, we typically have them doing a left upper body workout, a modified lower body workout, a core strengthening workout, and then whatever mobility type stuff that we can come up with that isn't going to stress the healing tissue, basically. So yeah, I'd say that I'd say that a lot of stuff that I program right away I end up transitioning and handing off to the S&C because they're awesome at what they do. Like I love working with them. Um, and it's nice to be able to kind of hand some of that stuff off to them too. And that's their wheelhouse, right? Like I feel like my wheelhouse is probably more the rehab side of it. So I like handing it off to them when it's appropriate, but I think there's a good collaboration between the both of us.
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate that. And how often do you jump into the weight room and just kind of just check on those guys?
Try to go in there every day. I don't necessarily go in there to ensure what they're doing is correct because I trust the S&Cs are in there. But yeah, I like to go in there and just make sure, uh, just see what they're doing. It's interesting to get some new ideas too from the S&C coaches and see what kind of things they're thinking and collaborate. But our setup is nice too because our gym is right off of our training room. So basically, you can just take a couple steps and get into the gym and take a look and see what's going on. So it's good.
So do you take some of your players, do some work on the table, whether it's open chain mobilization, whether it's soft tissue, whatever you're working with them, and then okay, we're going to go right into the gym, and I want to do some loading patterns here, so we can kind of just integrate, get that brain, that neuromuscular kind of re-education going on. Like, okay, well that's cool. I'm not seeing as much as this particular movement as I'd like. Let's go back to the table. We're going to work on this area. And do you have that kind of back and forth action, or I am, and
Yeah.
no, and I don't mean to, this is not a slam toward any specific discipline, but often we fall prey to protocol. And that means that you don't actually have to think, you just follow whatever somebody wants you to do. How much freedom, how much creative license do you have?
Feel like we have a lot. I feel like that's one of the benefits of the job too. Like I said before, like if you need to test and retest someone, get them into the gym and have them move a little bit and see if things are getting better, better, worse, not changing kind of thing, we can do that. We have free will to do that throughout the day, which is nice. And like I said earlier, like the nicest thing is if you do need to spend that 30 to 45 minutes with someone, whether it's soft tissue stuff on the table, and then you're getting them up and taking them through some corrective exercises or whatever it may be, we do have the ability to do that because we're not set to a specific schedule, like you are in the clinic where it's so and so's here at 10:30, the next person's here at 10:45 kind of thing. And we have enough staff down here right now too, which is nice that we can handle a little bit more volume. But yeah, I would say I probably don't do that as frequently. I do more of like the retesting stuff. Like we'll do some soft tissue or some treatments or some mobilizations on the table and then get them up and moving. And occasionally, yeah, get them into the gym and just try to do something in the gym to see if things have changed at all or have gotten better. Usually when I have more time on my hands, I'll do stuff like that. When things are crazy and chaotic, it's probably more just time on the table in the training room.
And are you in the crazy, chaotic kind of schedule right now with spring training kicking off, or what?
We're almost there. I mean, we've been pretty busy for a while, but yeah, I'd say we're almost there, getting close. I would say next week, well, not next week, in 2 weeks when spring training officially starts, it'll be like we're crazy chaotic. But right now we have some camps going on and stuff, and we have a pretty decent sized rehab group. So we're definitely busy, but not peak busyness, I guess.
Okay, let's talk about the team that you have, like the rehab group, because you mentioned it several times. You've got quite a bit of staffing down there. What is that comprised of?
So there's 3 totals, including myself. There's 3 of us full-time PTs that are down there that handle all the long-term rehabs. So, like, in a normal year, like, we'd handle any long-term stuff that happens in Arizona with the rookie ball teams, but then we also handle any of the affiliate long-term rehabs. So any guy from, low A, high, double A, triple A, I guess a general rule of thumb is if it's an injury that's gonna last maybe more than 2 weeks or gonna take 2 weeks to rehab, they usually send them to us in Arizona. So we don't travel, we just get the guys shipped to us. But yeah, 3 full-time PTs down here year round, and then we have an athletic trainer that's dedicated more as like a float, so he'll travel to some affiliates a little bit, but he'll also be there to help us with rehab and take guys to the doctor and take them to MRI appointments and whatnot. And then we have a minor league medical director and coordinator who are both athletic trainers. So they help us out a little bit with that, but they're obviously pretty swamped with all the admin stuff they need to do. And then we have in-house mental skills, dietitians, and then we have like our team docs that show up. They're not housed at our facility, but if we need them, we can get a hold of them pretty quick. So yeah, and then our in-house S&C coaches. So we have one S&C that's dedicated to rehab. His title is Rehab Strength and Conditioning. And then we have our rookie ball strength and conditioning coaches that are down there as well that can help out as needed.
Yeah, so rehab strength conditioning seems to be a rather new title that's been created across the field. Um,
Yeah.
is that something that interests you, or do you like being on the more the rehab than the S&C? I mean, I can see how that would blend together.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think just my training, my background with physical therapy, I think I would stay more the rehab side of it. I think, at least in my limited knowledge of being with the Giants for a couple of years, most of those positions are held by someone who has been an S&C coach at some point or for a while. So I guess I see myself more as the rehab side of it and not more as the strength and conditioning side, even though it is dedicated to rehab.
And how many players do you have showing up in the next, say, 15 days or so? There's some already there, obviously, but in 2 or 3 weeks' time, how many are going to be around you?
Man, yeah, I think we have. I mean, if you include the rehab guys and then the guys that are there for camp right now, there's probably over 100 right now. And then once you get all of the guys for spring training from all the affiliates, I mean, you're getting upwards of 150, 160, however many guys. I mean, and granted, not all of those guys are injured, right? So our rehab group right now is in like the low 30s, which is pretty big for a rehab group. I think we probably have one of the bigger rehab groups notoriously in baseball. We also have 3 of us staff full time, which makes it nicer. But yeah, we have like 30-ish on our caseload right now, and then with the camp there with the healthy guys, we're probably close to 100 guys in the facility right now.
Dang, how are you with memorizing names?
I'm pretty good for the most part. Yeah. It's hard
Right
with like the
on.
new incoming, like the free agents and the guys that you trade for and like the incoming rookie class and all that. That gets a little bit tricky. But for the most part, pretty good. Especially if they've had any stint in rehab, you kind of recognize them a little bit easier, obviously. But yeah, it's tricky. Sometimes, I mean, they usually have like a shirt or a jersey with their last name on it, which helps.
All right. So when it comes to the situations that you face, we've already mentioned Tommy John and post surgical rehab and so on. What are some other basic, most common issues that you're dealing with amongst these 30 or so in rehab right now?
Yeah, Tommy John's big, obviously, and then we get a lot of shoulder stuff. So we have a couple labral repairs. You get your just general like rotator cuff tendonitis type stuff. That's not a surgical case, obviously. Hamstring strains, we don't have a ton right now, but those are always pretty common. We've had a lot of like low back issues, I would say, over the past year, whether that's like a lot of guys with like stress reactions or like pedicle stress fractures, stuff like that. And occasionally some disc stuff, not a ton of like lumbar disc herniation type stuff. But and then we've had, I feel like, an uptick, I think all of baseball kind of has, with like thoracic outlet syndrome type stuff. Um, being more prevalent, but those are probably the big ones. For sure, shoulder and elbow, and then lower body wise and trunk wise, and then the obliques every once in a while, oblique strains. But yeah, mostly shoulder and elbow, and then you get those some of those soft tissue injuries that are pretty recurrent.
And with all of these kind of repetitive symptoms, because that's the majority, these are not contact traumatic kind of issues we're dealing with. It's very easy to fall into a pattern of, okay, this guy's got a hamstring strain. I'm going to give him this, this, and this, without actually looking at the individual and maybe encountering some other things that have occurred that created that situation. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's. I don't sense that you're the type of physical therapist that is just going to pull out a sheet of mimeographed exercises, circle them when it comes to rotator cuff, and then I've got this file over here for plantar fasciitis and so on. How, that's not your way.
No, I mean, I think that the biggest thing for us is like, or at least for me with some of that stuff, is like I try to be as objective as I can because, like you said, everyone's different. I think the big thing for me from like a strength standpoint is we started to utilize a lot more strength testing to get some like truly objective numbers to get a force output for like the shoulder or the hamstring. And that's been huge too. And then I think take that in combination with what we find on like our S&C, like the FMS movement screening type stuff, like how well they're rotating, what they look like from like a pelvis, um, like biomechanical standpoint, and we have lots of those tools at our disposal. But yeah, you have to make it as individualized to the person as possible. I mean, not with that being said, there's some go-to exercises that I typically have in my bucket, but for the most part, you're trying to make it as specific and individualized to each player as you can. And I think that's where it helps the collaboration between like our biomechanics team and our S&C team, and then all of our screening that we do and testing that we do on the training room side of it.
Yeah. Side note: the sun's shining pretty bright on your face there, and I'm realizing, yeah, this brother grew up in Minnesota, and now he's in the desert. I just we'll get away just quickly. I want to know, how was that transitioning from the Great White North down to Cactusville? Are you doing okay with that?
But we're still alive, still surviving. Yeah, the summers are rough a little bit, but everyone from back home asked me that too. My dad will call me and be like, "Geez, I saw that it was 120 all week down there." And I said, "It's not any different than when it's 30 below in the winter in Minnesota. It's like you're not going outside just for fun to sit around. You're usually by a pool or in the air conditioning, or if you're back home, you're in somewhere that's heated. You're not just going to go outside and hang out." But yeah, it's been a transition for sure, but I definitely will take the heat over the cold.
I bet. Well, at least you didn't say it was a dry heat. I thought that was coming. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so was that?
Yeah, I mean, that is true. I mean, we do get that a lot. Yeah, it does. It's so cliche, but it's true. Like even back home, being in like 90-degree weather and humidity feels worse than the 100-degree and no humidity down here, in my opinion. So
Yeah. Now, not to choose favorites, but if there were uh, maybe an age range, maybe a position, maybe a style of athlete that you have more affinity toward when working with them, is there? Do you like the veterans? Do you like the rookies? Do you like the ones that are coming up from the farm league looking to make to the big show? I mean, do you have, not that you have to again have favorites, but do you have an affinity toward any of them?
I think there's definitely a benefit when you work with the guys that have been around for a while, just because I think they understand their body more. So I think like you can collaboratively make a rehab plan that's going to make the most sense for them, and they're going to have the most buy-in. So I think from that standpoint, like working with a guy who's been around for a while, that whether you want to call them a veteran or not, is beneficial, but in some ways it's pretty fun working with the young guys too because they're so green that they're willing to try anything. And I think there's a benefit to that too. So I'd say personally, I think I do enjoy working with the guys that have been around for a little while, just because I feel like when we tailor their exercise prescription and their rehab plans, it's just easier in terms of um, understanding what they need to do, not doing too much, not doing too little kind of thing. Whereas you're definitely a little bit more hands-on with the younger guys who don't maybe know their body as well or don't fully understand what the goal of the rehab is, but there's obviously benefits to that too.
And there's so many techniques that can be encompassed within your field, like Graston, MAT, and so on. Are there specific techniques that you have found to be more effective? Of course, every situation is going to be requiring something or else, but like, what do you latch onto? What are the types of techniques that you found to be really effective?
I mean, there's like you said, there's so many out there, and we have so many modalities at our disposal too. I think the ones I use the most that I feel like I'm truly that are truly making a big difference and I see like a benefit from our athletes are I've taken a couple needling classes now, so I do a lot of dry needling. I'd say probably do it almost every day on guys. Just various spots in the body, obviously. And
So you're
then
not looking to make any friends at this point, is really what you're saying.
yeah, exactly. Some guys really like it, some guys hate it, but it's good for them. For some of those guys that hate it, they do it and then they feel better and they buy in a little bit. But I'm also not gonna force it on a guy if they're just like deathly afraid of needles. We'll find some other modality to do. But yeah, we do it a lot. And I feel like that's one of those things that maybe there's not a ton of like research behind it, but anecdotally it does seem to work super well. Um, and then we use a ton of BFR at our location, whether it's post-op or not. We've actually kind of started using it more from like the recovery protocol of kind of like that ischemic preconditioning type thing for our guys.
Yeah.
They'll use it post throwing, or maybe they'll throw it on their lower body and do like a BFR bike as like a flush on a heavy day or something. But we use a lot of BFR, not only from like the standard, let's use this to be able to load someone post surgically, but also from like a recovery strengthening side of it too.
Nice. Yeah, because that way you don't have to load very heavy and you can get the same fatigue state.
Yeah, it's been super nice and very beneficial for us, and I think it's been cool to see it in the baseball world because I think people, even before I was there, obviously, have started utilizing it in different ways that I had even been exposed to.
And what's the frequency like blood flow restriction training with your athletes we'll just take Tommy John because I imagine you're probably putting sleeves on them and having them do some type of movement. It's high intensity, so I can't imagine you're doing it with every session. Like what, once, twice a week? How often?
Yeah, I'd say probably more. I mean, the most frequently we go is probably like probably 3 times a week during some phases of the
Okay.
TJ, just for like a shoulder rotator cuff routine. So they're not going to be under occlusion for a super long period of time. But if we do it more than that, we're never do it targeting the same area. Like if they do a shoulder program with it one day, then maybe we have them do like a really light forearm manual resistance program, depending on where they're at in their TJ progression. But yeah, we use it pretty frequently, I'd say. But yeah, it's not like they're gonna get like shoulder every single day. So we actually started doing it a lot pretty early on. One of our other colleagues with a different team had talked about they do like the um IPC, the ischemic preconditioning, like the recovery protocol. They actually do it like really early post-op when guys aren't allowed to exercise. They'll do it on like their lower body just to try to minimize as much atrophy as you can and hopefully get like some kind of systemic response. So we actually have
Hmm.
started doing that a little bit too. So alternate
And what
like
are you finding?
between it seems like I mean we haven't done any like studies or research on it, but it seems like it helps at least once they're ready to transition to the gym, it makes the transition to the gym a little bit easier. Um, and it's nice, we'll just switch between, like, their legs or their opposite arm and stuff and just have them do the recovery mode while they're doing the game ready or the compression on their other side to decrease the swelling and inflammation, so I feel like it's just, like, a really easy thing to implement, and there's, some decent research showing that it can help, ideally help blunt some of the atrophy, so we figure anything we can do is beneficial.
Right on. So, I'm in Santa Cruz, so I'm right over the Santa Cruz Mountains to San Jose, where the San Jose Giants play.
Mhm.
And I gotta say, I love it. If anybody's listening from the San Jose Giants organization, it would be great if you get Comcast back as a sponsor, because the reason why is because they used to put on movie night in the summertime, and they would put on the jumbotron screen of some type of Pixar or Disney film. It'll be family free evening. You bring your blankets and you bring your cooler. You can hang out with Gigante, the mascot, or go to the barbecue. And there was a throwing tent, a pitching tent, and all that. And then as the sun set, you could watch the movie out in the ballpark. And there was nothing like it, aside from, of course, going to the smaller venues and watching some minor league ball. I bring it up because do you come up this way, or are you just locked into Arizona? Do you make the rounds up to San Francisco or San Jose at all?
Mostly in Arizona, so we do travel a little bit. So I'll get out to San Francisco for if I need to bring a guy out for surgery to see like our team surgeon out in San Francisco. I'll get out there a little bit. I have not actually been to San Jose. We've been doing more end of the year data collection on our pitchers and stuff at the end of the year. And I've been to, so I was in Eugene last year and then the year before out in Richmond to do some data collection, some range of motion collection. So I actually have not made it to San Jose, but yeah, we get out a little bit, but not too much.
Yeah, okay, so the data collection, that's interesting. Are you just passive range of motion? Are you looking at arm speed? What are you assessing?
So preseason, there's a lot more data collection that happens. So typically on the PT side of it is yeah, passive range of motion, and then we combine that with the strength conditioning, movement screens, and everything preseason. And then the last couple of years, we've been trying to. I think in an ideal world, we'd get more range of motion collections done throughout the entirety of the year, but the last couple of years we've been getting preseason and then postseason. So yeah, the postseason we just typically do passive range of motion on our. We just kind of isolated it to our pitchers as of now, just because it's the most realistic thing for us to get done in a short period of time. Um, and right now we only have, at most of our affiliates, there's just the one athletic trainer, so it's hard for an athletic trainer to be able to get all of that done. So that's why they typically fly one of us out to help with that.
Got it. All right. So you've got GPS on shoelaces these days, tell you about how fast their sprints are, their distances, their recovery, their fatigue state, and so on. Do you have it on the wrists as well to show like um, throwing speed, torque, or power, or anything like that? Just curious.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't know if there's other companies. The only one I'm familiar with is that the Pulse. It's like an inertial or the IMU sensors. And so they wear that in like a sleeve on their forearm. And that's been around for a little while. I mean, gold standard's obviously going to be like your motion capture stuff in a
Yeah.
lab, but at least this tool is able to provide you with it spits out spits out a torque value, an arm speed, an arm slot. Um, yeah, shoulder rotational speed. And then you can obviously count their number of throws. And then the system itself that now Driveline owns is able to calculate like a workload and acute to chronic workload ratio type thing and spit all of that data out as well. So we utilize it a lot on the rehab side to not only watch and make sure like throwing volume is staying where we want it, but also to see, what like workload type stuff is pumping out. So we're trying to be a little bit smarter about how we progress with that. But the guys don't typically wear them. They don't wear. You can during like spring training and extended, they can wear them in game, but no guy. I don't think any of our guys wear them during the season at all, unless they're rehabbing down with us.
And when you're looking over all these stats, all the sports science data that's coming through, are you looking at it from like a daily newspaper, looking through the classified ads? You're just skimming through to see what pops out, or are you just looking like you're studying for your finals?
I'd say we more skim over it. I think same thing with our like range of motion testing. You try to find those people that you're trying to look for the people that are like red flags. So essentially skimming through it and making sure you're not missing someone who could easily be, at higher risk for injury based off previous stuff that we know research wise. But yeah, more so skimming through it just to make sure there's nothing that jumps out. Um, and then, I mean, injuries there's so many factors that go into an injury, so it's hard to say if this person doesn't have X, Y, or Z for their mobility, we have to stop them for throwing. But we do utilize like the data to kind of guide our progressions and be like, yeah, this is something we need to keep an eye on at least, or maybe get them into the training room more often to work on some soft tissue restrictions that could be limiting them.
You mentioned assessments several times now, and you've alluded to the FMS. So I'm wondering, when you're talking about shoulder assessments with your throwers, with your pitchers, and so on, I'm thinking the inline lunge, the overhead squat, and the shoulder mobility are pretty much the ones. I guess you could the quadruped, torso rotation, and so on. But I have a feeling you go deeper, like SFMA, or you have already have your joint by joint assessments aside from the FMS, many people are familiar with it. What other kind of biomechanical assessments are you doing, like joint assessments?
So in like for the physical therapy for our shoulder, we'll take a static, like a passive measurement of shoulder flexion, shoulder external rotation, internal rotation on the table, and then elbow flexion extension. And then we typically look at their scapular mechanics. We try to measure their scapular upward rotation. That's a little bit tricky to measure with a goniometer, but we do try to get a number on that to see what that looks like. And a lot of times you can kind of visualize that one easier too. But that's what we do from a more of like a joint to joint standpoint. And then all of our incoming pitchers now, we have an in-house biomechanics lab with the Giants, which we're pretty lucky to have that. So all of our incoming pitchers that get drafted or sign as free agents do like an initial motion capture session with our biomechanists. So then they spit out all of that data for us to look at too. So then we kind of sit together in meetings and go over like the data that was found on the motion capture and then try to correlate that with what we found from an S&C side movement screen and a PT side, passive mobility screen. Try to put the pieces together.
So you don't do an active mobility screen aside from like you do passive, but then do you take them up off the table and have them go through shoulder flexion, extension, abduction,
Yeah.
adduction, and so on? Okay.
Yeah, when we measure their shoulder, their scapular upward rotation, in combination with that, we just do a general like shoulder flexion abduction and look for kind of scapular mechanics in general, but nothing too intensive on our side of it. But yeah, actively to see what things look like and then load them up a little bit if they need to be loaded up and see if the scapular mechanics change at all. But nothing
And you
like
got one of
wildly
those
crazy.
You got one of those big ass plastic goniometers, or are we talking like you found yourself an app now that you can just put against the medial spine of that scap, and wherever the phone goes, it gives you the outcome?
Yeah, that probably would be easier. We've messed around with it a little bit, but typically we'll do like a bigger goniometer and actually like measure the upward rotation. But we've used
Do
the
you feel kind
phone.
of like a caveman? Like when you're doing that, you're like,
Yeah, kind
oh
of.
man,
Yeah, no, you do. You're kind of like you're getting your measurement and then thinking to yourself like how accurate is this actually? But at least it's
get me the
consistent, I
slide
guess.
rule.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, the tech is cool. I've used more of the like inclinometer type stuff on the phone for like closed chain ankle dorsiflexion, like put it on their shin and see what that angle is, or we use it a little bit for like that crossbody abduction. You can kind of put it on the back of their arm. The only hard thing is if they're pretty meaty and have a big tricep, then it kind of is awkward to get it on there. But those are really easy to get an angular measurement, so I like doing it for that. But we haven't done it too much for the scapular stuff.
Okay, we're coming near the end here, and Tom, I can't thank you enough for sharing everything so far. I've learned tremendous amounts already, but I'm curious if the T Wolves or the Twins happen to call you up, like I don't want to put you in a hot spot with the Giants or anything, but do you have other aspirations? Aside from being one of the three full-time physical therapists for the Giants organization in Arizona, I you seem like a man who's not necessarily satisfied with doing the same thing over and over, and you're learning a tremendous amount. Where does your life and career want to travel?
A good question. Yeah, I mean, it'd be really hard to pass up a job with like your hometown teams. I think if they came calling, that'd be a really tempting offer for sure. I think as of now, like it'd obviously be awesome to get some experience and be able to work on the major league side of things. And I think there's pros and cons to all of it. And I've sat down and thought about it more lately with my wife and I had recently just had our first baby in November, so family life is a lot different now for us. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it'd be awesome to work in the major leagues and at least get that experience. But then sometimes I'm like, I'm pretty blessed to be able to work in Arizona and go home to my family each night and not be on the road so much. I think in a dream world for me though, I'd love to make it to that level and kind of make it to the peak of of the PT position, whatever sport I'm in. I'm really intrigued by, football as well. I grew up playing football. My dad was a football coach at our high school too. So I think football at some point would be fun. Just a little bit harder in terms of avenues to get into football, just without, not as many PTs in that world as there are in the baseball world. So yeah, we'll see. I don't know what's gonna
All
happen,
right.
but it's exciting.
Well, for those in the Vikings organization that are listening,
Yeah.
Tom, you can give your contact information. How do people follow you? I know that we connected through LinkedIn because that's a fantastic networking source. But do you do any Instagrams? You're too young to Facebook, so well, maybe you do some Xing or some Snapchat or what?
Yeah, I was on Twitter for a while. I'm not on Twitter X anymore. Yeah, on Instagram, I do have an Instagram page. It's just my name, Tom Battaglia. I don't post a ton of baseball stuff, so disclaimer there. It's more just kind of my everyday life type thing. But yeah, I'm probably most active professionally on LinkedIn in terms of making connections and chatting with people and stuff.
Right on. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on and hanging out with me for an hour. I appreciate it. And good luck to the Giants this season. It
Yeah,
would be
thank
nice
you.
to get up to the park and watch a couple games up there. And who knows, if you're in the neighborhood, you got to let me know. We'll grab a pretzel.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let me know. I can get you some tickets or something.
Oh, that sounds good. And there we go, another episode down. I want to thank Tom and the Giants organization for making this happen. Remember, go to setantacollege.com. Check out all the educational paths they have to offer, including certifications for personal training. There's bachelor's degree as well as the master's degree. If you want to sign up for one of those, just go to setantacollege.com. Enter RS10, RS10 for 10% off tuition. We'll see you next week.